Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitatta bhavantu sukhitatta.
Hello, I'm Dave Jacobson, and I'd like to talk with you about love. It's very, very rare that we encounter people talking about love in the context of Buddhism. I find this rather strange because as a practitioner and student of the Buddha's teaching, I find a lot of love in the Buddha's suttas, the way he treats people, the way he cares, his compassion, and so on. I think love is very important to the Buddha, and it should be important to those who want to emulate him or follow him as well. I'm saying this in the context of a very powerful dream that I had last night. And I'm not going to tell you the dream because that's a good way to make it lose its power. And I don't want to give up that mood, that energy that came along with the dream. But I do want to share its message. And the message is this, that we all need love, we all want love, and we all seek love. But then when we get love, a whole new class of problems comes along. And we often find ourselves sabotaging our love out of fear. And this is a very deep problem. It's not an easy problem. You have to look deep into your heart and see what is really going on. And oftentimes that will require us to have insights that maybe we don't want to look at. They're tough because they deal with very primal needs and feelings. So let me see if I can describe it the way it came out from my dream this morning. Love is an interplay of yin and yang, aggressive and passive, the active and the receiver. And typically these are identified with male and female roles, but actually they could be anything. And what happens is that when we get close to the opposite polarity, the yin and the yang, the male and the female, the aggressive and the passive, when the two poles come close together, there's a tendency for them to switch, to roll over into their opposites. And we're afraid of that. For one thing, we become ego-identified with one role or the other, and we're afraid to lose our identity. For another, we're afraid to lose control, that we have things set up in a certain way according to our role, active or passive, male or female, whatever it is. And we're afraid that if things change, we're going to lose our control over the situation. And especially, we're afraid that the aggressive or the initiative or the active energy will get out of control and destroy everything. We might feel, if we're on the passive side, we might feel a danger of being consumed, of being overwhelmed. But the active side feels it just as well. From the active side, the male side, one feels the possibility of being overwhelmed by the receptivity of the female side. That one could radiate all his energy into this tremendously absorbent space, and it will just dissipate and be gone. And then what? So along with love, there's a great deal of fear as well. But the fear is actually based on something illusory. That is ego identity, identification, and attachment. But even so, that fear is real. We have to acknowledge that fear. And how do we deal with it? Well, in most cases, when people love, they try to isolate themselves from the surrounding community. They go into a private space. And in that private space, this is when all the fears come up. Even though the retiring into the private space is also out of fear of maybe the people in the community will be jealous. Maybe they'll be envious and try to stop or sabotage this love. So people seek privacy. They try to get away from others. The proverbial honeymoon, right? But every honeymoon comes to an end when the lovers discover that the very act of loving tends to turn their roles into the opposites. So, what to do? Well, from the receptive or passive side, there is a need for some control or some check on the power of the active side. And from the active side, there is a felt need to reinforce one's power and not dissipate one's energy completely into the passive side. So even though actually if we go through these transformations, we find that there's nothing lost. Or actually everything is lost, but nothing goes away. It's hard to explain these things sometimes. What is really needed is an environment that supports the love and also provides a safety net so that it doesn't go out of control. What's needed is a supportive community, a community that is strong enough, that's honest enough and authentic enough to actually support the love. When love blooms, when it blossoms between two individuals or more, there should be a group around it that says, that's okay, that's good, go for it. We're not jealous, we're not antagonistic, but we're trying to provide a safety net if things get crazy. Now, this is the ideal. What often or more often happens is that the active partner will have a set of friends and the passive partner will have often a different set of friends. And they're each rooting for their side. And this only increases the conflict or potential conflict in the relationship. So what is needed is a new type of community where everyone is spiritually advanced enough that they're not clinging to their roles either, that they're not holding expectations that minimize or damage the exchange of love between the partners. This is hard to talk about because we almost never experience such a thing. Usually what we experience is that the ecstasy of love makes others jealous, and they try to sabotage and divide and conquer, separate the lovers and like that. So as soon as they get a chance, whenever the lovers have a misunderstanding, which they eventually always will, then the friends try to intervene and usually just make things worse, isn't it? So what I'm saying is there needs to be a new kind of community, and we're trying to develop that kind of community here in the Freebird family community. And what we're trying to do is create a community based on individual tantric practices so that when there is a love affair, people aren't jealous. They are fulfilled enough in their own lives that they can let it happen. They're okay with it. And so far, we're just in the beginning stages of this experiment, which, as you can imagine, is a big deal. It's kind of complex. But we are trying to make some advance in this area because we don't want to see our friends unhappy. We don't want to see them estranged from one another. We don't want to see them breaking up. And we also don't want to see them pulling away from their friends so they can have a little privacy because they feel like if their friends are too close to their love relationship, they'll tear it apart. We want to be bigger than that. We want to be more tolerant, more open than that. And so I'll let you know how things work out. So far, so good. But consider some of these insights and how they might benefit your relationship.
Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitatta bhavantu sukhitatta